Women in Water, a bilingual initiative of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. In this podcast, we are dedicated to empowering women, challenging stereotypes, and delving into essential water issues. We highlight the knowledge and experience of women committed to our environment, especially in the border region between Mexico and the United States. Hear from women in politics, activists, businesswomen, teachers, scientists, and many other professionals who share a common purpose. Water unites us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Women in Water from the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. In this series, we highlight the voices of women in water experts as they share their experiences, research, and projects. Our guest today is Dr. Adriana Zuñiga Teran. She's an associate professor at the University of Arizona School of Geography, Development, and Environment, with a joint appointment at the Udall Center for Studies in Public Policy. Dr. Zuñiga's research bridges urban planning, sustainability, and environmental governance centered on water infrastructure systems. Adriana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. Thank you, Elia.
All right. Well, we're going to start with our first question. We'd love to hear about your personal and professional journey. So we would like to know, how did you transition from architecture into sustainability, water research, and environmental governance?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question because it doesn't make sense. It seems like I did an 180-degree turn and just pivoted into a new field, but it's not really like that. I studied architecture and worked as an architect for several years before coming to the University of Arizona to do a master's in energy conservation, but still in architecture, design and energy conservation. And there, I learned about the impact of buildings on climate change, on the environment, and I was shocked. I was not trained in those topics. I didn't realize that architects, land planners, urban designers make such an impact on the environment. So I wanted to learn more about sustainability and all that. That's what led me to do a PhD in arid lands resource sciences, which is environmental sciences in the desert. And in my dissertation, I focused on design, but how does design affect the use of green space? Because I learned that green space like parks and trees and the vegetation has a huge impact in humans' health. So I wanted to learn that. And then from nature and this access to parks, I pivoted into green infrastructure as a way to manage water in the built environment. So that led me to a postdoc position studying water at the Udall Center, and eventually that became my expertise. And how do we make decisions about the placement of this infrastructure, of green infrastructure and nature-based solutions? That's environmental governance. How do decisions on the environment, on policies are made? So I kind of developed that expertise as well as I progressed into my academic journey. So that's the short answer to a very long version that I have.
All right. Well, thank you for your answer, Adriana. It is a 180-degree turn, but not really, because everything's related. And we still see that design lens showing on your research when you're working and with all the experience that you have. So with that in mind, let's talk about what it takes to bring those ideas to life in desert cities. So much of your work focuses on green infrastructure and resilience in arid urban environments. So what unique challenges do cities like Tucson face when implementing nature-based solutions?
Well, there's many challenges, of course. We published a piece on precisely the challenges for mainstreaming green infrastructure in built environment professionals, which is this question. And we have had these challenges that we built into design guidelines. We need to know what works and what doesn't work, but every all the guidelines are context specific, so they cannot be standardized. So there's a paradox there. So we need to learn more about what works, but it varies, right? So that's a big challenge. Socioeconomic challenges, this type of infrastructure consistently happen in neighborhoods that are wealthy and that have space, that have big yards, that have access to big parks. So the inequalities are a big challenge to tackle. The finance, funding, who pays for it, the maintenance, who takes care of this infrastructure, even if it's a little pocket of vegetation, but it needs constant maintenance, and it seems to be like a hot potato that everyone, like, you do it, no, you do it, no, well, it's paved over it because no one wants to do it. So all those challenges. But in green infrastructure in Tucson in particular, is that at least for while it gets established, the vegetation needs water. It needs like 18 months of water, and that's exactly what we don't have. So that's a conundrum that, and then the programs only fund native plants that eventually won't require water because that's the focus of the policy. So then you kind of are excluding other parts that they need more funding or more aid, and the wealthy just plant what they want, and inequalities here and there. The maintenance is always an issue, as I mentioned, but luckily Tucson is a leader because they solved that problem of maintenance. There's a segment from Tucson Water, Storm to Shade, that is tackling maintenance in public spaces across the city from different entities. And then for me, the biggest challenge is for a green infrastructure project to be successful in the long term. You need community engagement. You need to engage the people that are going to be living around that, to take care of it, to protect it, to ensure it's long term. So you need to kind of ask them, what do you want there, and what kind of plants, and what maybe art, and so that people have buy-in in the project and attend and kind of feel that it belongs to them, and it's good. They are stewards of that space. So they need water, they need maintenance, and they need community engagement.
Wow, that's really helpful to know. Socioeconomic inequalities and meaningful community engagement, they do shape whether nature-based solutions succeed, particularly in this type of cities and other arid cities around the U.S. and Mexico. So I'm going to move to the next question that's also related to green infrastructure. So how does green infrastructure contribute to water security, public health, and overall community well-being? Because this Women in Water series, it focuses on water. So we're talking about green infrastructure. I would like us to jump a little bit on water security, public health, and community well-being.
Yeah, definitely. Well, green infrastructure has been mostly pushed in wet areas of the country, if we're talking about the United States, but of the world. And it's mostly to manage flooding because our infrastructure is aging, and in many cities it's combined. The sewage and stormwater pipes are the same so when there's a lot of stormwater or flooding, then we have sewage spills. And then the cities are in trouble with the EPA because they are violating the Clean Water Act. So to comply with federal regulations on water quality, it's cheaper for them, instead of replacing the whole infrastructure and opening all the streets, to kind of manage flooding in every pocket of vegetation so it infiltrates and they don't pressure the big pipe system. So that's how water security comes to play in terms of preventing water pollution and water contamination from sewage spills. But in Tucson, in the dry context, it's actually to replenish aquifers, because when you capture that storm water and the runoff, instead of causing flooding and just, draining out of the city, if you infiltrate it, you're recharging aquifers. And that's where we get our water from, groundwater. So it's eventually it goes down it's a natural recharge system, and that increases water security. But at the same time, if you use rainwater or stormwater to irrigate the landscapes in arid cities, you're decreasing water demand. You're not using potable water to irrigate your plants in your yard. So that's decreasing demand. You're managing demand, and that's why the water utilities are very, very interested in everyone adopting this type of practice, because they can have more water in their budget and reduce basically by conservation. So that's another side. But just having vegetation, trees and green spaces, it is really linked to public health, and it's more livable, particularly in the desert, in the hot environments that we are seeing temperatures increase every year and breaking records, because trees provide shade, and you can have this microclimate that makes a little bit more bearable the heat in the summer. It also, vegetation cleans the air, reduces noise, and has all these mental health benefits of lower stress, lower use of antidepressant, speedy recoveries from illness. There's a lot of research that backs the link between nature and health, particularly in cities. I won't go into that because it's a lot, but and then community well-being. If you engage the community in planting trees and bringing together to adopt a park, people getting to know their neighbors get a little social cohesion, which is really important for resilience in case of a wildfire. For example, in LA, neighbors are the ones that really help out each other. So this community cohesion, let's not take it lightly. It's really important for resilience. And going out to parks or planting trees, these efforts are especially good for fortifying community cohesion and community building. So that's how the well-being, community well-being comes to play here as well.
Thank you, Adriana. That connection between public health, aquifer recharge, community engagement, heat mitigation, those are really important factors or that are associated to the implementation of this type of infrastructure, green infrastructure. We do know that these solutions make a change, and we also learn about the possible challenges that you mentioned before. So through your work in low-income neighborhoods in southern Tucson, what have you learned about environmental justice and equitable access to green space and water? So you already mentioned this in the previous question, but maybe we can expand a little bit about inequalities and environmental justice.
Yeah, of course. So we've been working with low-income neighborhoods or communities here in Tucson. We noticed that they don't have a lot of trees. There's a lot of barren soil, and the heat is very much more intense over there. It's more paved, and they have the airport and the highway and many of these infrastructure that generates flooding and generates heat to the neighboring areas. So, but why don't they have more trees or more? So we thought, let's plant more trees, right? It's just an easy fix, but it's not really that easy. So we found out many reasons, and I'm gonna go through them, but many low-income folks do not own their home. There's still a big gap in home ownership in the United States. So if you are a renter, you're not really taking decisions on what goes on that yard. It's not actually your decision, or you don't have the ability to apply to some of the greening programs because it's only meant for homeowners, so you even are not eligible. But everyone who pays for water, and you have to pay for water, everyone contributes to the funds that's the money that funds all the programs. So everyone contributes, but renters were not eligible, for example. That's a big injustice. And then low-income communities, imagine they are homeowners and they could apply, but in some cases they have low educational levels. They don't know how to apply for grants. It's a skill. They don't have the time. They may have two jobs. They might have other more pressing needs like childcare or putting food on the table. They may not have transportation access to the places where there's a meeting and they are informing about the grant and they cannot attend. They don't know. They may not speak English. So there's a lot of barriers that explain the lack of engagement, why they don't apply for the programs that are available. And so then the programs are designed with other needs in mind, with the needs of the people who did attend to these meetings. So that's where the inequities are happening, or the way we understand why these issues are present here in Tucson, but they're transferable to other areas as well. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I think that your response underscores how environmental justice is shaped, not just by infrastructure, but also by systematic barriers to participation and access. So it's like there's different, we start studying green infrastructure, or you started studying architecture, and then you move to the environment, and then green infrastructure, and then it becomes like a social problem, and then you have to jump to governance as well. So it's like a full circle that's important to consider. So with that in mind, I'm going to move to my next question that's exactly related to the policy elements. From your perspective, Adriana, what policy elements do you think are essential for building more resilient and sustainable cities in arid regions?
Okay, well, so policy building, policy design, who designs the policies? It's always good to ask, resilient for whom? Sustainable for whom? And how do you define it? And there's a lot of, need to kind of broaden definitions and all that. But just to keep in mind that policies are a human construct, and they have something in mind, behavioral change in mind, or to benefit something in mind. So to be more equitable, to be more inclusive, we would need to engage a broad segment of the population, particularly those people most vulnerable or most affected by those policies, to really know how the policy will take effect. Because we may think we know, but unless we walk in someone's shoes, we really don't know. So it's important to do engagement. I touched on it on my previous answer, but I'm gonna just highlight it, why community engagement is key for a good policy to work for everyone. And then engagement, we've been trying this, and it's not easy. It's actually a really tough job. You need to build trust with the community. And trust takes time and takes effort, and it's a job. I mean, to show up at meetings, to continuously. So in short, it requires funding. Funding, it's an effort. It's a job, and it's a continuous funding. But who's gonna pay for it? I mean, it's like funding opportunities rarely fund community engagement. It's really, I've looked, believe me. And then, it's very easy to just ignore this step and just put something on a website like, oh, there's a meeting on a Saturday morning, and that's it. And so the outreach is not conducted well. They didn't really reach the most vulnerable, or they may be at work at the time of the meeting. So even the scheduling for the outreach is tricky. So my short answer, or after a long answer, would be we need to fund community engagement to really build more resilient and sustainable, but meaning that sustainable with an equity also in mind. Sustainability has three pillars: environment, economy, and equity. And most people forget the equity side. I would just put it at the center of these needs.
Thank you, Adriana, for your answer. You highlighted how policy effectiveness depends on inclusive engagement, time, and sustained investment. So turning now to your work in a binational context along Arizona and Sonora, how does the binational context shape water decision-making and the implementation of green infrastructure?
Okay, well, that's a really good question, Elia. Thank you. So water management is really hard, right? It's siloed. An agency manage supply, another manage quality, another manage flooding, it's segmented. And just bridging silos within the same country, it's a big challenge. Now imagine that in a binational context, in Ambos Nogales, for example, where decisions on water on one side of the border directly affects the other side. You have the additional burden or challenge of getting together two nations where only federal level institutions can talk to each other. So a border is a big challenge in water management for sure. But then this context in a specific Mexico, US Mexico, or Arizona Sonora, we have completely different water governance approaches. Mexico is more centralized and the US is decentralized. So decisions are made at the state level or county level in the US. And in Mexico, it's CONAGUA, it's at the national level, and it's very hard to kind of negotiate or agree. So this is the beauty of green infrastructure, because green infrastructure is a decentralized solution. You don't need agreements between countries. Anyone can build a basin and plant a tree in their yard, in their school, in their church, in wherever. You don't need permits, you don't need agencies to agree or anything like that. So that's why green infrastructure have been kind of a novelty for trying to tackle some of the very important issues that the border cities have to deal with, which is flooding and sewage bills and people dying and really, really tragic scenarios. So we've been working along those lines of where, for example, green infrastructure can happen, and spatially and so on. But in terms of programs, of policies for GI, let's talk about who funds them. In the US, or at least in the Southwest, it's the water utilities. As I mentioned before, in the bill, they charge a fee, conservation fee, around $1, and everyone pays their water bill, and that's where they have money to fund these programs. In Mexico, the water utility is underfunded all the time. People don't pay their water bill, and it's really hard for the utilities to recover their investment. They're understaffed. They don't have money. They don't have money, and getting the funds is really, really tricky. So we have unparalleled levels of funding, more funding here or in Mexico. The other promoter of these programs in the Southwest is flood control, an agency to proactively try to decrease flooding, because in the desert, most of the rain events can be managed with green infrastructure. They're very small events. So they realize that, and now instead of building gray infrastructure, canals and all that, they are building stormwater parks in Tucson, for example. But in Mexico, what happens? We don't have an institution, an agency for flood control. There's a gap. There's non-existent. Maybe the National Guard will help with the survivors of a flood, but there's no planning ahead of how to avoid this in the future, how to manage these waters. So we have so much asymmetries in the institutions, in the funding, in the programs, that's why we have a big asymmetry in green infrastructure. And also just city building. Mexico is more dense. Every little square meter is built, and in the US, the zoning and all that allows for more space between buildings, setbacks, and spaces where green infrastructure can actually happen. So that's another big asymmetry. I think that's what I can share about the binational context and green infrastructure.
Thank you, Adriana, for your thoughts. That contrast in governance approaches across the border, as you mentioned it, is an important dimension of binational water work, and it needs to be always considered when we're working in regions like Arizona and Sonora. So thank you for mentioning that. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'd like to shift from institutions and policy framework to more of your personal experience. So I'm going to ask you, as a woman leading interdisciplinary and binational water projects, what has your experience been navigating academic and policy spaces in the water sector?
Okay, well, I think this is like two questions in one, so I'll tackle the interdisciplinary aspect of your question. Being an interdisciplinary scholar is really hard. Our PhD, yours and mine, is the same.
It's it's
an interdisciplinary program, and it's really hard because you have to go outside your comfort zone. Whether you come from the physical sciences or the social sciences, your background doesn't matter. You need to bridge and include some of the other aspect in your research. Excuse me. So that's a challenge in itself, and it's a big effort because you have to get used to being uncomfortable and not knowing and accepting and valuing someone else's research and knowledge. But we're trained for that. So we kind of went through that pain, and we now accept that to solve really wicked problems that we have right now, it's only through interdisciplinary research. Well, now with my experience, I'll go beyond that. I think we cannot really solve the problems only by interdisciplinary research, but now with transdisciplinary research. And what do I mean by that? It's like bringing stakeholders, community members to your research to actually customize the research questions to their needs, so they are actually used by the people who need them. So that's the new effort that we've been doing through engagement, things that I've explained, but because that's where you really tie the outcomes of a project to solving a problem on the ground. Now, again, if you add the binational aspect to these projects, well, it's a big challenge because just the institutions, the money, how you transfer money from one institution to partner with colleagues in Mexico has been a big challenge all the time, and the cultures. So, but I am binational. I was born in Mexico. I understand. I am bilingual. I can bridge that. There's a group of people, you as well, who can move freely and comfortably in both sides of the border. So that helps a lot. And the interdisciplinary training as well. But as a woman, that's the third aspect of your question. Well, I don't have to tell you, but across the world, even in the most progressive cultures, women work more for less. So, and then you have to manage home and kids and housework and all that. So that's a challenge, but not only for me, for all women, I can say. And then we have to demonstrate more. As a woman of color in the US, we need to be constantly professional. I feel that we need to kind of demonstrate continuously our expertise, our professionalism, our work ethic. And that's been my motto. I try, I do my best all the time. And I think in the long term, it gets recognized and it gets valued and all that, but in the long term. So it's a struggle, but it's doable and it's exciting. It's a really nice career. I do love my job.
Thank you, Adriana. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I see that your leadership and also your mentorship really come through in the way you describe your work. So before we wrap up, I'd love to give you a space to share what you're most excited about right now. So is there a current project or initiative that you're excited about and you would like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, of course. We are very much at the Ural Center involved in an effort to understand the issue of PFAS, of these forever chemicals. We're seeing that this pollution surpasses anything we've experienced before. The contamination now has gone more beyond planetary boundaries. It cannot be contained. It's from everywhere. The management, the cleanup, the mitigation, it's just, wow, I think it's the biggest challenge of humankind if we can, contain this pollution that is now known to affect horribly human health. So we started this initiative a couple of years ago when the EPA launched the MCLs at maximum contaminant levels regulation at the federal level for drinking water and for 4 parts per trillion for 4 types of PFAS, 4 or 6. Which it's not enough. There's 15,000 kinds of PFAS, but the most common are now regulated. So how are utilities managing this? What is going on? Who's monitoring? Who's testing? We have initiatives at the national level to understand partisanship and their tackling PFAS, their approach to PFAS, democratic states versus Republican states, because they have different regulation. Anyway, I can talk on and on, but we are very excited on the PFAS, not on the optimistic, but more on the challenging aspect of this environmental issue. And my other project that I'm very excited about, because I have a fellowship from the Ural Center to study environmental justice in the south side of Tucson, where we have one of the longest standing community engagement process around Superfund sites for TCE and 1,4-dioxane and now PFAS. So the affected communities that are Hispanic, low income in the south side of Tucson and the Tohono O'odham Reservation have been dealing with pollution for decades. And I'm interviewing people to see whether after 30 years of cleaning efforts, has justice been served? What's missing? How does justice look like? So I'm excited to talk to people and learn more about their own perspectives of how justice really happens on the ground. And yeah, those are my 2 efforts at the moment.
Wow. Looking forward to learning more about your projects. That might require another interview
session.
or even a science talk where you can explain more about the results of your different projects. So Adriana,
happy to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna receive an invitation for that as well. We're not gonna let you go.
Thank you. You're kind, Elia. Thanks.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your work and perspective. It is clear how your research connects to real communities and real decisions, and we're really grateful for the leadership you bring to this space. To everyone listening, thank you for being with us. This has been Women in Water, an initiative of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. You can find this episode and others on YouTube and Spotify. So thank you so much, and until the next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Elia.
Thank you.
Women in Water, a bilingual initiative of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. In this podcast, we are dedicated to empowering women, challenging stereotypes, and delving into essential water issues. We highlight the knowledge and experience of women committed to our environment, especially in the border region between Mexico and the United States. Hear from women in politics, activists, businesswomen, teachers, scientists, and many other professionals who share a common purpose. Water unites us.